I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that I use to detect what type of accounts are being used for every vendor. And I'm going to export a whole bunch of reports into Excel and then import the list of vendors that I want with the actual account that I want it to be the default account moving forward. So just to give you some context, if I were to write a check right now, and I'll pick any vendor here, I'll just type it, and I click on the vendor or hit tab, QuickBooks will automatically select an expense account for me. Now, why does QuickBooks select an expense account for me? It could be two things. One, here in the vendor center, maybe it was hard coded into the vendor's name. Like somebody actually went into the vendor's name and clicked on account settings and actually hard coded it in here. Now, not the case for this particular account, so that's not the reason why. The secondary reason why QuickBooks will select or show a default account is because it has been used at least once in the past, and that's the account that you used, and you never switched it and used a different account altogether. So I'll give you just a quick example. Let's say I were to change the category for this vendor's name, and I'll hit save, and then I'll try to do another check to the same vendor. Now QuickBooks is basically going to show me nothing because it's confused. It used one account before, a different account the second time. So I need to actually use a vendor's, an expense account to a specific vendor 3 times, right? So I'm gonna keep doing it here to show you. I'm gonna do it 3 times to the same category. So if I choose it 3 times, then on the 4th time when I try to do something, let me do one more. Maybe it's 4 times. Save and new. Let's try it now. There you go. So if you do it 4 transactions in a row, QuickBooks automatically says, okay, even though you changed gears on me, I'm going to automatically give you this category. Now, what ends up happening is over time, you can't lose track of what accounts are being used for one vendors. And me as an accountant, for the most part, I like to see consistency. I like to see that the same account is being used for the same vendor, although it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. Most of the times, that's what we want to see. So what I want to show you is, number one, a report in which I can evaluate how many times this vendor was used for multiple transactions. And then what I can do is I can do some Excel magic, and then I can import it back in using a feature called Batch Enter. It requires you to have QuickBooks Accountant Edition or Enterprise Edition to do the import back in. I mean, you can work with any QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Pro, Premier, any version to export the report that I'm going to show you, but only Accountant and Enterprise can import it back in the way I'm going to show you how to import it back in. Anyway, so let's start with the report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this very special report. I'm going to go to Reports, Custom Reports, Transaction Detail. Then under Dates, I'm just going to do all, right? Because I'm not really interested in looking at a very limited time period. I'll just do all. And then under Columns, I can get rid of all the columns because I only need 2 pieces of information. I need my left margin, and it has to do with the Excel export. So I need my left margin, and I need source name. Source name brings always the name of the vendor no matter what. So we're going to pick source name, and then under filters, we're going to go to account, and we're going to click income and expense account. So where are you? All income / expense accounts. So that's basically going to bring any income or expense or cost of goods sold category that I may have used for a particular vendor. And then down where it says name, I'm going to select a vendor's name. That way I don't see any customers. So although in the account itself, I picked all ordinary income and expense, I actually am picking only vendors, which means that there's likely not going to be any income in here, all expenses. But the reason why I do all income and expense is because I want to show both cost of goods sold and expense categories in there. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then what you end up seeing here is just a bunch of vendor names. That's it. But up here where it says total by, I'm actually going to change total by from total only to account list. And then all of a sudden, I have all my account categories, okay? And I have the vendor's name next to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and export this. So I'm gonna click on Excel, create new worksheet, and hit export. Now in Excel, you're gonna have to pay close attention to this. There's a lot of moving parts here, and you have to follow every single step, step by step. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'll select the entire data set, and I'll double click between any two columns. I'll double click on that. That way it just resizes everything into a much readable format. Then I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this empty column here between D and F. I don't need that, so I'll just get rid of that completely. And then here under the first column, column A, I'm not gonna get rid of it. What I'm actually going to do is going to put in the header here order, and then I'm gonna put a 1 on the second row, a 2 on the third row, select 1 and 2, and then I'm gonna drag all this way down, all the way down to the bottom. And the purpose of that is just to keep an original order, just in case when I'm sorting, something gets messed up. So that becomes useful. You don't necessarily have to do it, but I think it becomes useful. Then for the second row, I'm going to put here account, and then I'm going to put sub account 1, and then sub account 2. Okay. So the reason why I have this is because there are sub accounts. Okay. Perfect. So so far so good. The other thing I'm going to do is I need to fill under landscaping services. I need to fill that landscaping services with data. Now I could literally just come in here, click and drag and fill it like this, but I would have to go account by account, which takes forever. So I'm going to show you just a quick way that we do that. The first thing I'm going to do is the first sub account and the second sub account. And this could go all the way 5 deep, by the way, because you could have a lot of sub accounts. But basically these cells, these 3 cells that are on top, I'm going to fill them with a space. Put a space here, and space here. And there's a reason for that. It has to do with the next step. But I'm just going to fill all these sub accounts, and this could go all the way 5 deep with spaces. I don't need to do it with source name. Then I'm going to select my 3 columns with accounts. I'm going to hit Control G on the keyboard. That's the go-to command. I'm going to click on Special. And then I'm going to click on Blanks. And hit OK. What that's going to do is select all the cells that are there. And it's going to ignore the first 3 where we added spaces because those are not blanks. And then I'm going to put in the formula bar, I'm going to put equals. And then whatever you see data start being typed right there, I'm just going to do equals, and then I'm going to select the cell directly above it. So I'm going to do equals, in this case D4, yours may look different. Then I'm going to hit Control Enter. Now, one thing that's really important, if I didn't change the formatting before I started doing the formula, this may bring what's called raw text. So let me go into Home, hit Undo. Perfect. Let me do my change the formatting to general first. Perfect. Control G, special, blanks. Okay. Perfect. Equals, cell directly above it, Control Enter. And that will solve that additional issue with just showing the formula there. Now, remember, when I was at this point, I didn't hit Enter. I hit Control Enter, because Control Enter pre-fills all the information that's in every single selected field. Okay, so far so good. So let me select these 3 columns, and I want to get rid of the formulas. So I'm going to copy and then paste it back in there as special. So paste special values. So I can either just click on paste values if I happen to have an icon there, or I can go to paste special and then select values. Same result. That will basically just bring raw text in there instead of having those formulas. Now I'm going to select these 5 columns, go to Data, click on Filter, And then I'm going to sort these by source name. So I'm going to hit sort A through C, and then I'm going to go all the way down. And whenever I don't have vendors anymore, so everything down here, no vendor names, I'm just going to select everything there and delete it because I don't need anything that doesn't have any vendor information. Perfect. Okay, so as long as I got vendor information, I'm good to go. The next step is I want to get rid of anything that has the word total in it. So I'm going to go to subaccount A, sort A through Z, go down, and anything that has the word total in it, assuming that you don't have an account with the word total in it, that's the totalization of the original report. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Delete. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here with subaccount 2, sort A through Z, go down to anything that has total in it. Perfect. All the way down to total, and then delete. So I should be left basically with my raw vendor to accounts sheet. Okay, so my next step is now to go into the column here, column F, and then I'm going to use a very specific Excel formula that only exists in Excel 2016. Okay, I'm going to hit equals, and then I'm going to type text join, open parentheses, and then the first question is, what's the delimiter? Now in QuickBooks, in order for you to bring accounts back in, you have to put the parent account and the sub account, and you will have to separate them with a colon. So I'm going to put the delimiter is going to be a colon. So I'll put there, oops, not that, just a colon and close quote. Perfect. The next one is, do we ignore empty? Well, the answer is yes. That way it ignores anything that doesn't have a sub account, essentially. And then I'll put comma. And then it says, what text do I want to join? So I'll just select account, sub account, and sub account. And then I'll hit a close parentheses, hit enter. And then it's going to bring in name, sub account, and then sub account. Then click and drag all the way down. Perfect. Then I'm going to just copy my vendor's name and the account. I'll create a new sheet altogether. Let's just start clean. So when I paste, I have to space special values. And in essence, I have my vendor's name and my account. Then what I can do at this point is, because now I have just pretty much raw information, I can take this table, resort it, data, sorted by my vendor's name, hit OK. And now I get to see, right, the quick way to audit whether the vendor's name is being used, like in this case, for more than one account. Now, I worked with a very small subset of lists, so this looks workable. But if you try this on your own, you're going to have this huge spreadsheet with a bunch of information. So the easiest thing would be is to run a pivot table, because pivot table will summarize things much better. So let me go ahead and give each of these a title of some sort. So we'll call this vendor and then account. And then I'll select this data set, go to insert, pivot table, hit OK. Then I'm going to drag vendor down to rows, and then account, also drag it down to rows, and then I'll drag also account down to values. What this is going to do is do a count. It's going to tell me how many transactions for each vendor were used under a different account. So that's actually sometimes becomes really helpful. Now I'm going to clean this up even more by going into the design tab for pivot tables, and I'm going to get rid of subtotals, get rid of grand totals, and then do a report layout that's in tabular form. Okay, so it kind of looks like a spreadsheet. And then I'm also going to do repeat all item labels. See, so what ends up happening is now I have a much cleaner version of this sheet that only shows basically the repeats. So now I can just take this information and I can copy it into another new cell, paste values, and then now I can make my decision. So I can say, look, it looks like for the most part, I was using this category for Connor. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these two. So I'm just going to delete the categories that I don't want for my vendors, basically leaving just one. So this should be a pretty quick process. So after I get rid of all the ones that I don't want, I'm basically left with a list of vendors and a list of the desired accounts that I want. So what I can do at this point is I can delete this cell. I don't need this anymore. And what I want to do is copy this information 2 more times over. So I'm going to go to copy and I'm going to paste and then paste it 1 more time. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to now batch enter these and I'm going to have them at least 3 times. We'll do it 4 times just in case. So we have it at least 4 times coming into the database with a transaction. And then next time I use any of these vendors, it's going to be defaulted to these accounts. So I'm going to go back into QuickBooks and I'm going to go into Accountant, batch enter transactions. Typically what I do is, to not mess my banks, I'll create a credit card. And I'll have a credit card which I'll call it vendor assignment or something like that. I can make that inactive afterwards. So I'll select the credit card and then basically I'm going to paste information in these columns, payee and account. So I'm going to grab this data here, the whole data set. There we go. Copy it. Go back into batch enters, paste it. Okay, that's all going to be with zeros. Date, you can put today's date on that, which will be the default that it comes out. So this is not going to add anything into my database in terms of new transactions. That's just going to create a transaction with a 0 value. And by doing that, now I'm entering basically 4 times with that category that I picked. So I'll go to Save Transactions. Okay. And then I can write a check to any of these vendors. Let me just double check here. So let's say, for example, I write a check to Robert Carr Masonry. And then we're going to see that this Fountains and Garden Lightning sub-account will now be the default. So I'm going to put Robert Carr Masonry. And notice that that became the default account. So in some cases, this is, maybe too much work for what it's worth. But what ends up happening is over time, if you do this for the end user, and the end user is, for example, entering data in their checking account, and they're just typing the name of the vendor and then hitting tab, what ends up happening is, notice the account gets automatically filled, and it's much less propense for errors, and it really helps the end user choose the correct account. Now, this technique only works using historical entry because that's what we exported into Excel. However, if you wanted to bring in new vendor names and with a category next to it, you can certainly do that. That will work just fine. So if I just wanted to type there Chevron, right, or something like that, or Citgo, and let's say Exxon. If I wanted to create new vendors, which I could on my spreadsheet, and let me just look at my chart of accounts real quick to see what my category for fuel is. So where's my category for fuel? There it is, it's automobile fuel. So I could just type it in here, automobile, and then put the column and type fuel. And this has to be exactly like it's in QuickBooks. Like if you have an error here, that won't work. But if I do this, and I kind of do this in batch, I can now bring in those vendor names in batch through a different tool. So I'm going to bring in just the vendor names, and I'm going to come into list, add edit multiple entries, select vendors, where it says view. I'm going to put unsaved vendors. That's basically going to give me a blank sheet. and I'm going to go ahead and paste my vendor list from Excel. That just brings the vendor, not the account, just the vendor. Bring that vendor list, hit save, go back into my batch enter transactions. Same thing, choose credit card and that weird account we created called vendor assignment. Go into my spreadsheet, copy these over, come back into QuickBooks, paste them there. Now I'm not going to get any errors because the payee is in my database, and hopefully I chose the actual account in QuickBooks. Hit save transactions. So what's going to happen is now if I'm in the register and I have a transaction from, let's say, Chevron, and I just type it in there and I hit tab, automatically my category gets chosen, right? So this is basically a very interesting way of forcing specific accounts to specific vendors in QuickBooks. Now, I didn't import it 3 times the way I did it with the first group because we're brand new vendors. So all you have to do is bring in 1 transaction and that's it. The ones that I did 3 or 4 times is because I wasn't sure which ones had a default vendor to it. So I just did it 3 or 4 times so I can force it in there. That way it comes in automatically on the next transaction. Hope this was useful. I know there was a lot of moving parts. It's kind of an advanced technique, but I hope this was useful and something that makes you better and faster to do data entry. Subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, definitely hit like. Add comments below with questions or maybe other ideas of other type of videos we can do. Thank you.